Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was a movie. A well-directed movie, but a movie nonetheless. You see, my problem was that, considering who the director was, I decided to walk into the movie with some expectations instead of none at all. Because as I discovered after the movie was made available on Disney Plus in late June of 2022, while it was allowed to have Raimi's visual stamps of approval that we all love, apparently he had to fight with Feige in order to get some of them to make it to the final cut? Now, I'm more than happy to admit that the reasons my expectations were at the level that they were was because, like Spider-Man, Raimi is a fan of Doctor Strange. And while the premise was centered around this being a must-see movie in order to better flesh out and explain some stuff in the multiverse saga that Loki didn't get a chance to explain, I was hoping Raimi would use this movie as a chance to rectify some things that the first Doctor Strange movie, and even the Infinity Saga as a whole, real talk, kinda did dirty regarding not only Strange's mythos, but also better establish the magical elements of the MCU that were brought over from the comics. Not only did this movie not do that, but it also misinterpreted Wanda's development from WandaVision by going ahead with what a lot of people initially thought was going to happen once they announced Scarlet Witch would be in the film during San Diego Comic-Con of 2019. The decision to just straight up make Wanda the film's villain. Now, don't get me wrong, the decision gave us some beautifully horrifying visuals and feats of power we anticipated from Wanda since she soloed Thanos in Endgame. And for a lot of people, that was what they initially went to go see Multiverse of Madness for, and I'm not knocking y'all. What mouth, bitch? But outside of Strange bonding and growing to care for America Chavez, and also learning the importance of letting go, especially when you realize, thanks to the mid-credits scene, that Strange letting go is basically a setup for this faith-based meme, there's nothing really about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that makes it a true Doctor Strange movie, like all of the Iron Man, the first two Captain America, and correctly assuming all three Guardians of the Galaxy stories in the MCU just so happen to be. Nor does it grant Wanda the proper payoff one would expect from her, considering what WandaVision was leading up to and what was presented regarding her status in Multiverse of Madness. But Wanda and Strange's lore deserved more than just this film being used as a setup for future plot devices in the Multiverse saga, despite there being more than enough room for everyone. And I think my adjustments to the film are just what it needs to make this Raimi flick up there with Spider-Man 2. Let's begin. Hey readers, Laurent here, offering you analysis and perspective of your favorite bits of geek and pop culture media. If it wasn't obvious from the intro, this film will in fact contain spoilers for Marvel Studios' Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's currently available to stream on Disney Plus, so give it a watch before continuing here if you haven't seen it yet and don't want me to spoil pivotal points of it for you in the video. Other than that, if you end up liking what I'm putting down after this video is done, there are multiple ways that you can show some love. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can join my Patreon. There are multiple tiers that range from $1 to $20 that give you access to things such as copies of my video scripts, early video releases, discount codes to my merchandise store, and a whole lot more. Also, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. That way you'll get a heads up on whenever I post a new video. That's the syllabus. Now, on to the lesson. Raimi's direction was not the problem. I'm sorry for everyone who thought this was just going to be a riff on Sam Raimi, but no, that's not the case here. Actually, considering what the thumbnail of the video is, I'm quite surprised you thought that was the case, real talk. Then again, I can't really say that. There are alt-right fans of The Boys who took 3 seasons to start to figure out that Homelander isn't actually the good guy, so... What Sam Raimi brought to the table with Multiverse of Madness was individuality, which is what a lot of people who didn't want so much of a change from the formula the MCU provided for the past 3 phases were initially complaining about. Hell, I'd argue that the same compliment from me, complaint from others can also be made for Eternals, considering how many people complained about how different of a movie it was from other Marvel Studios films, yet I enjoyed it for being what I deemed a more matured Guardians of the Galaxy. While the first movie brought psychedelic and kaleidoscopic visuals that at the time felt incredibly unique, yet soon overstayed their welcome the more that they were associated with him, Sam Raimi definitely knew not only how to bring the magic back to Doctor Strange, but also highlight how dangerous and terrifying Scarlet Witch can be. But the root of my critiques of the film, both regarding Steven and Wanda's characterization and development, do not lie with the man responsible for making this film possible. It lies with the one responsible for giving him what he had to work with, the writer of the film, Michael Waldron, who was brought on to write Multiverse of Madness in February 2020 after OG director and writer Scott Derrickson and Jade Bartlet left the project respectively for creative differences. Now, he's going on to admit that, thanks to COVID, a lot of what was originally conceived for the film was scrapped in favor for what we got. And considering that he was the creator and season 1 showrunner for Loki, it was obvious that he was brought on board to help transition the movie's story into the overall impending multiverse saga. Or Secret Wars, whichever sounds better to you. He did so by implementing a few key aspects that'll definitely be referenced later on the closer we get to Kang's interaction with the world's mightiest heroes and beyond. Specifically, the concept of incursions, the event of 2 or more multiversal timeline branches crossing over and possibly resulting in either one or both of them being completely destroyed. And while it's Sam's direction and care that helped us be both terrified of and empathetic for Wanda, like he succeeded to do with most of his comic book villains under his direction, it seems that outside of Waldron planting the seeds to make Secret Wars a thing and wanting to show off how powerful she is when confronted with a group of superheroes, we don't even get that much care and dedication to either Stephen Strange's overall mythology from the comics and how it can translate into the MCU, or the same for Wanda and the decision to make her the film's antagonist. Especially since he knew firsthand by witnessing WandaVision just how beloved both her and the exposition that was forming around her in the MCU from key aspects about her from the comics were becoming. Aspects like the Darkhold, which was carried over from WandaVision and plays an important part in Multiverse of Madness, and Chthon, who was only mentioned in Multiverse of Madness, yet plays just an equal part in Wanda's character in the comics. And speaking of Chthon, if you've been with this channel for the past couple years, then you know that one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to Marvel Studios productions is for event-based storylines or guest heroes and members of their respective pantheons to hijack someone else's solo movie. That's partially why I didn't care for Civil War. And also partially why I didn't appreciate them using Thor Ragnarok as a vehicle to tell a variant of a Planet Hulk story, so that they didn't have to pay rights to Universal Studios in order to do so. And if you've watched a couple of my MCU theory videos in the past, then you know that I had that same worry/concern regarding one of Wanda's villains, Chthon, ending up being the main villain of Multiverse of Madness. Well, I'll tell you what. After watching Multiverse of Madness and seeing how they treated the Doctor Strange portions of the movie, I kind of wish they made Chthon the bad guy. Yes, I'm mad at how they used Shumagorath in the movie, and I'm kinda glad in retrospect that they weren't allowed to call him Shumagorath in the movie for legal reasons, because I didn't appreciate it that they made him a creature that Wanda could easily control with the power of the Darkhold to find America instead of a deity that's, on par with Chthon power-wise, but one thing at a time. If I can compare Chthon to a villain in the DC universe, it would have to be Trigon, the demon father of Teen Titans Raven. In the comics, Chthon bound his spirit to Wanda when she was born, after the Knights of Wundagore, yes, that Wundagore, tried to banish him after a werewolf knight tried to Lesser Kings of Solomon him in order to cure him of his lycanthropy. Comic books. Gotta love them unless they're racist. Now, part of the reason why Chthon bound himself to Wanda was because, as you'd expect, she's a Nexus being, which in the MCU was alluded to in WandaVision through one of the commercials of the various sitcoms we see her play out. And imprinting himself on a Nexus being so early allowed him to use said Nexus being to be his avatar in the physical plane later on down the line once they matured in their power. Chthon bound himself to Wanda when she was born for this specific purpose, and because he has dominion over all of chaos magic, being the author of the Darkhold in the first place, he was able to grant her the innate ability she has over chaos magic that we know her for today.
This is chaos magic, Wanda. And that makes you the Scarlet Witch.
So, as you can imagine, there are plenty of stories in which Chthon has possessed Wanda for himself, has tried to possess Wanda for himself, or those close to her in order to possess Wanda for himself. And while in the MCU, we've seen how the Darkhold affects regular mages like Agatha Harkness and Stephen Strange after prolonged use, I thought upon watching her heel shift in Multiverse of Madness that, considering she is a confirmed Nexus being in the MCU thanks to WandaVision, that her prolonged interactions with the Darkhold would reflect something like Chthon's increased connection to her now that she's using the Darkhold, allowing him to manipulate her mental state to seek her children through the multiverse by any means necessary, so that he can finally claim her as his avatar to once more wreak havoc on the physical plane. And for a minute, I thought we were going to get that, especially when the movie introduced us to Mount Wundagore. I thought that would be the explanation as to why Wanda decided to go as dark and brutal as she did, that this was Chthon amplifying all of her insecurities, grief, and rage that she always kept inside since that explosion first killed her and Pietro's parents. I thought this was the moment she realized the microchip on the back of her neck fried. And now the AI and the four mental tentacles were feeding off of her already present desires and encouraging her to act on them in the most direct, diabolical, and deadliest ways possible. But that's not what happens. There's no manifestation of Agatha's warning of higher powers now aware of a shift in things once Wanda first accepted the mantle of the Scarlet Witch.
You have no idea what you've unleashed.
There's no recollection of what she did in Westview truly playing a role in her actions regarding why she's doing what she's doing. Or of the one that had faith in her when others didn't, that's tugging at her strings in the midst of everything she's consciously and willingly deciding to do. It's just her. Because Marvel didn't feel like introducing another Dormammu when, considering everything she's been through and learned, might actually be what the story needs. So let's rectify that. One of the things I do not like that Marvel Studios does with its magical and celestial characters, at least in film, is that it limits them by oversimplifying them. The Vishanti are perfect examples. In the comics, the Vishanti are elder beings that consist of Hogarth, Oster, and Agamotto, their offspring, who broke the laws of non-interference amongst others like them, and both chose and decided to aid the best mortal mage to be Earth's defender of the mystic arts as the Sorcerer Supreme. In the MCU, however, thanks to the first movie establishing Agamotto as such, the Vishanti were just powerful sorcerers. His eye is just the housing for the Time Stone, and nobody knows the exact role of the Sorcerer Supreme. Not even the current Sorcerer Supreme.
Wait, I thought you were the Sorcerer Supreme.
No, he got it on a technicality because I blipped for 5 years.
Oh.
Can you tell that I really care about the state of magic in superhero comics? In a way, Chthon is treated the same. Instead of an eldritch godlike being that birthed chaos magic, Multiverse of Madness simply calls him the first demon. So, one of the first things I would do is use the Book of Vishanti B-plot to not only give a well-deserved retcon of all these very important beings and quickly establish their place as such in the MCU, but also use it for Strange to figure out what's going on with Wanda. If you've been following along with the video, then yes, you are correct in assuming that I'm going the route of Wanda having her desire to find Billy and Tommy being manipulated by Chthon now that she's the Scarlet Witch and that she's engrossed herself in the Darkhold in order to claim her as his avatar. Not only does this shut the mouths of those whose only knowledge of film criticism is on the cynical level of cinema sins regarding why she didn't just seek out a universe where her kids and Vision exist and she doesn't, but it also helps set Wanda up for a redemption worthy of her overall struggle that's on par with what Sam Raimi is known for with his antagonists. I'll elaborate more on that a little bit later, while also not denying the crowd of seeing Wanda just wreck house for the majority of the film. Wong finds this out by reading a portion of the mural that wasn't copied into the Darkhold, claiming that the Scarlet Witch is only destined to destroy the world because she's supposed to be the vessel for Chthon's return. That's why the creatures don't attack her when she first arrives at Wundagore, but bow. They don't serve her, they serve Chthon, and they can already tell that she's ready to be possessed by him and don't want to ruin the vessel. That's when we start to see and hear Chthon's manipulation a bit more clearer than before. And we definitely would have seen and heard it before, probably during the Siege of Kamar-Taj. Now Wong is aware of what's going on, and he's trying to reach her and let her know that she's being manipulated via her desire for her children. But Chthon's essence and speech is telling her that he's lying through an amalgamation of his and her own voice to up the creepy and this is my own thought factor. And that's what prompts Wong's projection off the temple cliff. So while Wanda believes this to be not a tomb, but a throne, her preparations to dreamwalk to 838 to find America show that this isn't a throne, it's an altar. Meanwhile, Strange finds out about Chthon's plans when he, America, and 838's Christine finally reach the Book of Vishanti, because I'll give them enough time to actually read some stuff before Dreamwalk Wanda arrives to destroy it. Jesus Christ! I'll have him specifically turn to a page that chronicled Agamotto's bouts with Chthon in the past, journaling information he found out about how Chthon tries to find his way to the material plane through possessing powerful mages that read his Darkhold and can innately cast the magic he has dominion over, chaos magic. That he, along with his two elder godparents, Hogarth and Oster, actually sealed Chthon away in his home dimension, confident that a mage strong in chaos magic wouldn't arrive in the physical plane because of his inability to interfere. Not only does this reveal to Strange that Agamotto was a mage created by gods that ascended to principality status, but that Wanda is being manipulated by Chthon with the intention of possessing her. Then, right as he's about to turn the page to read what Agamotto wrote down regarding what to do if said Scarlet Witch arrives in order to separate Chthon's hold on them, that's when Dreamwalked Wanda arrives. But instead of destroying the book, I leave it so that the blast sends it spiraling into the infinite space between universes so that it can be utilized in a later story. From there, I'd pretty much keep the story on track regarding Steven and 838 Christine being sent off to a universe where its variant of Strange is the only survivor of an incursion, including him dreamwalking back to the sacred timeline in his dead variant's body to fight Wanda. Only now, Chthon's hold on her has gotten visually noticeable despite her being unable to notice it herself. So while the fight between her, Strange, and Wong is pretty much unchanged, especially now that they all know that it's Chthon working through her, Strange helping boost America's confidence in her power consists of a wombo combo of her sending Wanda to her 838 variant home. At the same time, Strange does a modified astral projection spell on her in order to separate her from Chthon. Now that Wanda is physically separated from Chthon's hold on her and she sees what she's become, her "I will not die a monster" moment has a bit more meaning. She acknowledges that while she was egged on by Chthon, there were aspects about what she was doing that resonated with her, that thanks to them already being there, Chthon simply just grew those desires to a full-fledged wildfire from a small kindling in order to make it easier for him to take advantage of her. And it's through that acknowledgement that 838 Wanda helps her realize something. Despite everything she's done to get to this point, Wanda isn't done healing yet. Instead of seeking help from someone that can help her cope with all of her past and current traumas, the loss of Pietro and Vision, the world making her the scapegoat for the Sokovia Accords, being consciously aware of what she was doing in Westview, and now the fact that her children exist in another universe. She decided to face them head-on without a support network and exposed herself to dangerous forces that were counting on her to be reckless as a result. So until she can actually make good on rectifying a few things to give her that support that she desperately needs, she has to take the traumas that Chthon have been feeding on and use them to instead help others. And the others in this case are Steven, Wong, and America to fight Chthon. Which is definitely happening back on Wundagore while Wanda is going through this, by the way. Because there's no housing for what's been established of his physicality so far, an ethereal manifestation of Chthon is now at the altar of the Scarlet Witch. But while Steven and Wong are keeping him at bay, America is waiting for Wanda to understand the gravity of the situation so that she can bring her back to help. And she does so, giving her the opportunity to defy Chthon directly. And that's exactly what's needed for Prime Strange's Eye of Agamotto to activate and give his dream-walking body the power to banish him back to his home dimension. You see, one of the features that the Eye has in comics, and that's kinda referenced in the movies, is that the Eye of Agamotto is one of the only magical items from the Vishanti that stays with its wielder and can be used while astral projecting. And considering that dreamwalking is a form of astral projection and that Multiverse of Madness does good at showing that the Eye is more than just the previous housing compartment for the Time Stone, having it act on its own to have its power travel across the multiverse just to banish Chthon after sensing his vessel was denied him while in the presence of the Sorcerer Supreme gives us a perfect opportunity to put some respect back on the artifact. Not to mention, doing so under these circumstances will give the title of the Sorcerer Supreme in the MCU some much needed association with the Vishanti like there is in the comics. Which, upon Wanda staying behind to destroy the temple in order to make sure the Darkhold ceases to exist so that there's no way Chthon can use it to re-enter their world, and as a way for her to finish off her I will not die a monster redemption arc, will give Strange and Wong more motive to research the Vishanti and find the book somewhere in the space between spaces and see what associations they have with the Sorcerer Supreme, since according to both movies, they have very little knowledge of them. Is this a Deus Ex Machina? Yes. Do I care? No. No, y'all had an entire 3-phase ass saga dedicated to Deus Ex Machinas. Mama says it's my turn to use the Deus Ex Machina. Fuck you. Now, I honestly can't take full credit regarding my use of Chthon in this reworking. Right now, my YouTube mutual and fellow bi-boy Troy over on Fanboy Rewrites is currently pitching his idea for a Spider-Man College Years trilogy in the MCU following No Way Home, and how he handled the use of the symbiote for the second story in his trilogy I thought was a brilliant way to apply the manipulation and aggressiveness of outside forces affecting preconceived thoughts and desires. I definitely recommend you give his pitches a watch if you haven't already. See that, Nerdist? See what I just did? That's called referencing someone's work that did what I did first, regardless if they ended up being just as right or wrong as you. You should try it sometime. Readers, I love superhero magic. I love superhero magic mythologies and pantheons. Hell, I just love magic and fiction in general. And honestly, the fact that the only way Marvel Studios truly gives it the respect it deserves is in the form of its 2 Disney Plus executive shows, WandaVision and Moon Knight, 3 if you count the upcoming Agatha House of Harkness, is criminal. Now, this is usually the part of my pitch idea videos where I go, now the fact that I can come up with something like this and I don't even vibe with XYZ like that says a lot, but I do! I do vibe with this aspect of Marvel like that, and DC. I fucking love magic. Stop watering down magic like this, y'all. I'm fucking starving.
Help me.
But I'm always going to be featuring Brennan Lee Mulligan in my videos. This is my life now. But I digress. Readers, your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comment section below what you thought of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness if you've seen it. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class what you'd change about the movie in order to better do justice to anything that the movie initially touched on. Whether that be Steven's development, Wanda's development, the state of magic in the MCU, or anything else. Whatever question you decide to answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. A huge shout out to my patrons both big and small for helping make this channel possible. Make sure you check out the card at the end of the video to join, or check the link to it or any of my affiliates in the description box below. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.